Hello everyone and welcome to Summit 2020 by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. The Summit is a platform where leaders, innovators and pioneers share their perspectives on how to best build an economy that's resilient and regenerative by design. My name's Joe Isles. I'm the Circular Design Programme Lead here at the Foundation, and we are live on day 2 of the Summit. I'm delighted you could join us for this design laser session for the next hour or so. Hopefully by now you know that the transition to a circular economy is about design. Not just treating the symptoms of a dysfunctional economy downstream, but addressing the root cause at that design stage. Because everything is designed, at the design stage, decisions are made that influence how we make and use products, and those decisions, once made, are hard to reverse. So logically, design is the place to start, but on top of that, people just love hearing stories of great design for the circular economy. It really brings the topic to life and it gives it energy. It makes citizens, employees and customers hopeful about the future and the role that they can play. So we need a whole generation of artists, designers, creatives and storytellers to identify and scale solutions, to explore the boundaries of the idea and help the circular economy vision reach more people. And this laser session is made up of 2 parts. A bit later on, we'll be bringing together 4 of the most influential design agencies to discuss the scale of the circular economy opportunity. But first, we're going to start by hearing the story of one company on the circular design journey. And that company is DS Smith. DS Smith is a strategic partner of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and we've been really lucky to work with Alan Potts, who's the Design and Innovation Director at DS Smith for the packaging division. We've been working with Alan over the past 12 months and really trying to understand how we can inspire, equip and empower designers to create for the circular economy. And when you think of designers, you maybe think of design weeks or people coming out of the Royal College of Art or those in that sorts of agencies that we'll hear from later on in this session. But thousands of designers are in larger businesses and their story, their remit and the type of influence that they can have is really quite different. So that's what we'd like to speak to Alan about today. Hi, Alan. Thanks for joining us at the Summit.
Hi, Joe.
Maybe you could just start by telling us a bit about DS Smith's circular design journey so far. How did it start? And maybe why has design been embraced at DS Smith as kind of a starting point for the circular economy?
Yeah, sure. The journey started for us, Joe, when we signed up as a strategic partner a couple of years ago with the foundation. And we did that to accelerate our drive to the circular economy, but also support a drive for more sustainable innovation across our business. So I was fortunate in that regard, in that the senior leadership of the company had already signed up and were committed to this. So that was the crucial first step that was kind of already done for me. So when we signed up, that triggered a lot of activity across the business, in part the work with the Circulytics tool with the foundation. But of course, that's at organizational level. And what we had to do is figure out how we could really involve our designers across our business to make a difference every day at product level. And there's some complexity in that for us at DS Smith, in that we have over 700 designers spread across 200 manufacturing sites across Europe and North America. So there's quite a lot of remote working in that sense. So we decided we're going to create ourselves circular design principles. So we created 5 circular design principles along with you guys at the foundation. And that really is kind of a guidebook. It's a process that help our designers day in, day out, and the hundreds of thousands of packaging designs that they're working on through the year, to become involved, to understand what it was more about, to translate the principles into some sort of hard day-to-day realities.
And you started out there by saying that it was really the senior level support that paved the way. Has that been crucial? And if you were talking to some of the designers or people in your similar sort of position in other companies, would you encourage that is the starting point, really, to give that mandate?
Absolutely, 100%. You need the commitment from the top of the business. As you said in the startup, design is a core element of part of this, but design, shouldn't be seen as for designers. It's a company-wide issue. So it's fundamentally you get support at that high level.
And design shouldn't just be for designers. You've hinted there around some of the scope of the adoption challenge that you maybe face. Lots of different sites around the world, small and large teams working in different places on different aspects of the innovation puzzle. So how have you been tackling adoption? Because just creating some guidelines is only, it doesn't really work if they sit on a PDF somewhere.
Absolutely, and it's only a first step, and that's not the reason why we wanted to enter into this program at all. So what we did when we were creating the circular design principles, we involved some of our design community to help us do that. So we were getting engagement with the design community to do that. When we'd formulated the design principles, another thing we did was the logo, the graphic challenge that we were going to use as the header. So we opened up a competition across all the design network, and we had lots of different submissions, and we had some judging to be able to find the best one. So we tried to get that engagement and involvement right at the start. What we then did when we'd formulated that and got ourselves the logo, we kicked off again with the help of the foundation, a series of webinars where we went into awareness phase, went through the principles with a group of them, and then did a trainer. So we reached as many of the 700 as we could, and did posters and stuff in the different design offices across the 200 sites to really try and get this awareness up.
And some of what you're talking about there, I think something we hear a lot is that we need to inspire designers. And it sounds kind of obvious. And sometimes there's a sense that teams or senior designers are waiting for some inspiration to appear from the heavens. It feels almost like you've gone through, you've mobilized the existing tools that you have, and some of maybe things that maybe appear simple, like doing some webinars and posters and running a competition. You've leveraged assets that you already have. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. I mean, again, we're fortunate in that we've got a circular business model as it stands within DS Smith. So we have a recycling business and a paper manufacturing business, as well as our packaging business. So to some degree, the design principles were kind of putting what we were already doing in a context of the circular economy. But when you got into the detail, with the Learning Hub and all the stuff that you guys have got on that, which is fantastic content, you start to see there are some areas that are new and where we do have to change some things. So there's a balance between setting everything in the circular economy concept and the principles, and also developing some new content as well.
For those watching online, if you do have any questions for Alan, we'll be speaking to him for the next 5 minutes or so. So do send your questions in using the Summit platform, and my wonderful wingman Simon will be picking those up and sending those through. I just want to ask one more question, Alan, about the principles or guidelines that you've put together, because there may be other companies thinking about that and considering how they can put together some documentation or advice to aid decision making and to help designers make decisions that support the overall circular economy ambition of the company. How did you go about defining the principles? Were they very data-led or gut feeling or using expertise that you already had in the business?
Yes, all three of those and some more really. As I said before, some of what we did was kind of, in line with the circular economy principles anyway. So it's kind of a change of language towards that. But there are other elements where we had to bring in some expertise, including you guys at the foundation, but others. Some of these are quite specialist areas in terms of food contact that we had to bring in, or more into the sustainability and recyclability model. So it's a contribution from different areas of the business.
Okay, and fundamentally, this is we can go into the process of how you made those and the adoption, but really this is about impact and about trying to have a demonstrable impact on the materials that you use and keeping them in a cycle for longer, to go back to the fundamentals of a circular economy. So how are the senior buy-in, the strategy, the principles and the adoption, how is that leading to an impact on your designs?
Yeah, which is what it's all about. So we're going to start, and we've been finalising all the content. So we've gone through awareness. We're going to start engagement from January. So we've got a programme of training that we're going to start in January to reach the 700 and go through the 5 principles in much more detail with them. And that programme's going to take another 3 or 4 months or so. In terms of where we are, then we're seeing some great results already. We launched our EcoBowl product, which is an alternative to plastic trays in modified atmosphere. We announced a partnership with Aquapack a couple of months ago, which is a recyclable plastic alternative that we have a variety of different applications from. But there are lots of product level innovations that are making a difference. So even though it's early, we're starting to see some strong results.
Great. We've had a question in here from Rose who says, how has the DS Smith workforce reacted to the change or this mindset shift around design? Has it been a smooth process? And I'd like to add to that, have you seen more engagement perhaps? And what would help with increasing the engagement?
We've seen some great engagement. Like with anything, there are some early adopters to it. There are some that are following and some will take more time. But when you look at that, basic principle of the circular economy and the change from linear to circular, everybody's supportive of that, outside of whether they're not the designer, whether they work for DS Smith or whoever. That simple tenet is something that is attractive to people, and they want to make a difference anyway. What we have to try and do is make them feel part of something bigger. It's not just about DS Smith. It's not just about packaging. They're part of a much bigger thing. So that's what we try and do. And then, of course, with the circular design principles, you've got to give them some tools and some processes. You've got to give them the confidence to challenge where they see things that perhaps, go against some of these kind of principles. But I must say, from our experience so far, that there is a natural desire to want to change, to want to improve things, and it's more about enabling people to be able to do something on a day-to-day practical level. So
combining that increasing desire and willingness to bring a sense of purpose to their work and creating a framework in which to do that. Another question here from Laura, who says, how did you define the requirements or measurements to measure the implementation of circular design principles? You're smiling. This comes up a lot. I'm sure you've grappled with it extensively. So what about that measurement point?
Yeah, so developing metrics in this, I smile because, for everybody, this is difficult because, what is sustainability? And it means different things to different people. It's sort of one word. So when you start breaking down those metrics in terms of recyclability, in terms of renewable resources, and then you look at CO2, for instance, or ocean litter, then there are a variety of different metrics, and some of those metrics can conflict with one another. CO2 versus the recyclability, etc. So we're a packaging business, so we package other people's products. So all we can do, and we are doing, is be clear on the metrics and be clear on how we measure them, and our customers make a choice of which is right for them. So that's our philosophy. Is decide on the metrics, decide on a way of measuring them, and then as a packaging business, we can encourage and we can motivate. But at the end of the day, it's our customers decide, which of the priorities is right for them.
There's some great questions coming in on the link with education. Unfortunately, we're not going to have a chance to get to them all now. Alan, just as we finish, as someone who, for me, trying to stimulate and accelerate circular design innovation within businesses, that's what we're trying to do in the program at the foundation. Your story and the story of DS Smith, in some senses, is an ideal arc. Senior buy-in, set some strategies, some principles, work on adoption, and start to see impact on products. And no one's perfectly circular yet, but it's a good example of how that journey can work. What would be your perhaps one bit of golden advice for people in your position that are watching and maybe want to begin or continue on a similar journey?
Well, for me, it's keep it practical. That's the main thing. You can get involved in the theory of circular economy and the principles and stuff. And, there's so much content, there's so much this, that, and the other. But keep it practical. What do you want to do? You want to make a difference at product level. You want your designers to be designing along with the principles. And as I said before, let them loose, because they want to do this. They just need to be empowered to do it. They just need to have the tools to be able to do it and the confidence to challenge. So that was probably more than one, Joe. So sorry for that. But
No, it's wonderful. Let them loose. I like it. Thanks, Alan, for joining us at the summit. We'll let you go now as we move on to the next part of this laser session, but thank you for joining us. That was Alan Potts, the Design Innovation Director at DS Smith there. And there are more examples of how circular design is being adopted in businesses. So do check out our conversation with Hannah Alberg of IKEA. That's on the featured videos section of the Summit platform, as well as some stories from up-and-coming designers who have shaped their research or the first years of their professional life around circular design. Now moving on to our panel discussion for today. And whilst our panelists fire up their cameras, I'll just say that you may be aware that around 4 years ago, the foundation started working with IDEO, the global design firm, and together we produced the Circular Design Guide. That moment and the collaboration has been an important part of establishing design as crucial to the circular economy transition. But what we're really trying to achieve on a larger scale is a change in the way that design is actually practiced. A shift that prioritizes systems innovation and, of course, the three principles of a circular economy and the notion of regenerative systems. So to talk about that wider opportunity, I'm joined by an incredible panelist of designers today. We've got with us Esther Duran of Fjord, Marlin Orabak of McKinsey Design, Chris Grantham of IDEO, and Cara Pecknold of Frog. Thank you all for joining us and spending time with us today at the summit. I'm going to kick off with you, Chris. I don't want to show any bias, but maybe it's because we've known each other the longest. You're from IDEO. We've had that 4-year relationship between the foundation and IDEO. So maybe you could comment on how you think the circular economy presents an opportunity for designers, having spent some time on this in the past few years.
Sure, and thanks for inviting me to be here, and I'm excited to be here with my fellow panelists. So I think the design mindset is very usefully deployed in a transition like circular economy. The designers that I've met typically have quite a sort of rebel mindset. They want to interrogate, they want to reimagine, they want to improve. Reconnect the dots to show how things could kind of work better. I think they're also intensely practical. We have to spend a lot of our time figuring out how we get things to market, and there's no point in having a solution that you can't implement. So designers tend to be very practical as well, all very useful skills in a transition. I think that particularly millennial designers and younger, probably reflective of the generations kind of overall, are quite aware and much more, they've been trained to recognize design as a political act, that if you're putting something out there in the world, it's going to impact other people, right? It's not put out there into a vacuum. And I think that that's something that they increasingly, don't want to be complicit in if it's having a negative effect. And so I think that, those who've grown up in the climate change, native to the climate change crisis, native to the digital economy, native to the sharing economy, are much more inclined to sort of raise the bar, if you like, in the design world around these issues. But I think that the design approach can be very useful as well. So multidisciplinary teams tend to do well thinking in systems, tangibility. Most designers are biased towards tangibility. That's very important for building belief in what we're doing. You can show something is possible. And I think a huge thing is empathy for users and stakeholders. That's incredibly powerful in systems change. At the end of the day, we're changing systems about people's beliefs and the way people act. And so if we can really understand what motivates people and how we can motivate them to potentially act differently, that's incredibly powerful. So I think if I had to kind of give a frame kind of overall for why the sort of the design the design mindset's incredibly useful, it's probably this kind of bridging idea and kind of beacons. So kind of bridging, meshing kind of the new idea with existing systems and kind of creating new vehicles for impact and what Dan Hill calls design doing, incredibly important. And then the visioning piece, I think businesses don't leverage that enough, I think. We aren't really employed, I think, we're not really employing the creative process to really rethink, how big business shows up. So, in other words, we can't just have circular economy as a technical solution bolted onto an extractive mindset. And I actually think that the fact that the circular economy is not an end in itself, it's a means. I think designers can play a very, very important role there in helping us rethink how we're showing up, put a picture out there for what, the world could be moving towards. And I think that's a part of the design kind of mindset we're not really leveraging enough. And I think, that's important.
So it sounds like it kind of works in both ways, that the circular economy is an opportunity for designers to show up in new ways, to use your wording, and to give a sense of purpose, which is something that we just heard from Alan as well, and perhaps has never been more relevant than in 2020. And also the skills of the designers are relevant for the circular economy transition as well. We do have quite a full panel today, but I'll invite any of you to build on each other as we go through. And of course, to those of you watching online, feel free to send your questions in using the Summit platform, and we'll put them to this stellar panel as we move through. Marlin, I'll come to you next. What do you think the role of design agencies is in the circular economy transition?
I think, really building on something that Chris was already starting to talk about. And this is probably more about designers in general rather than agencies as such. But designers really have this possibility to visualize what the future looks like. And I think that's really needed in the transition towards a circular economy, because it's really hard for many companies to sort of move to this regenerative mindset when you've been living your whole life in a linear paradigm. So this shift is difficult, and designers can help sort of show what that future could look like. So I'm going to share like a short story. And this is actually a story of how also the corona crisis, this pandemic, opens up possibilities to actually move to a new business model for some companies. So imagine a company who sells car tires. So this is something that is a fairly expensive thing for consumers to buy. So what happens when the pandemic hits is that sales go down because people stop buying expensive things. So this company really started to think about, okay, so what can we do instead? How can we meet this new challenge? So they started to say that, well, what if we could provide our tires in a different way? What if we could provide our tires as a service instead of as a product? So what designers then can do is that, we can move in a couple of weeks, we can prototype what that service could look like. We could put it out there, we could fake it, we can pretend like that service already exists, and then we can have consumers try it and see how they like it, and we can get that feedback really fast. So you have this vision that the company can then work around. And what happens? Well, actually most consumers don't even want to own their tires because that's just a hassle. Particularly if you're in the Nordics, like I am, you have winter tires and summer tires and just need to store them somewhere. So it's fantastic if that's a service. So here, suddenly you have opened up a completely new possibility for this company to move to a circular model, because once the consumer has used the tires, you give them back. And you can take the tires back, you can refurbish them. You can also rethink the entire way that you design tires. You can design tires for longevity, for multi-use, for refurbishment. You can design them not for just disposal, a 3-year use and then disposal. And we know rubber is a huge problem in many parts of the world. Burning rubber is happening and completely destroying environments. So what happens then next, sort of leading me to the second point that I want to make, is that then you're facing this situation where you need to rebuild your organization from a producing company to a service organization. And that's a huge leap to make. And then in comes something else that design agencies and designers are really good at. And that's also something Chris mentioned, our ability to sort of orchestrate and facilitate this multidisciplinary change processes that needs to take place. And I think I speak for all of us when I say, recent years and the consolidation of the design industry has resulted in the fact that most agencies are now part of huge networks of, multidisciplinary big organizations. So we can bring in those experts as we need them. So whether that's, business analytics or chemical expertise or material experts or organizational change experts or whatever you like, you can bring that into place. And that oftentimes is what companies need to take them forward. And then, one thing to keep in mind, if you're in that place where you need to transform, is to make sure that you continue to have this internal learning. So you're not, giving away the learning to somebody external. So that's where it comes to the third point, where I think agencies have a huge role to play, and that's in capability building. So capability building is something we always do as a part of what we in our programs, and capability building with clients. And also capability building of our own internal teams, our designers, making sure that they have the right skill sets. So that's a huge and important role for agencies to play going forward, I think.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm sure we'll come back to some of those points around the design brief in your tire example, and the skills required. I think we'll come back to those in a few moments. I just want to come to Cara now, and thank you, Marlin, for the remarks there. Cara, this shift, which I think we're getting a bit of an insight into, it seems quite expansive, that there's a lot of opportunity here, that we've already blown the conversation quite wide just with in the few minutes we've been talking. Is this something that design agencies could work together on? This is the first panel that I've been part of that's involved for competing design agencies. What does it mean to be a competing design agency, or what does competition look like for a company like yours when faced with some of the challenges of today?
I think it's a great question, a great comment. I think competition is never a bad thing. I think it actually has spurred many of us on to create better tools or opportunities for our clients. So, I think we can all joke. I have many good friends and all of, and we've met at this panel to talk previously. So I think it's healthy and I think it's good. I think the ways that maybe we can look forward is not so much about the word of competition. I think that's part of the problem in a circular conversation anyways, is what does that competition look like when we're talking about sharing, when we're talking about restoration and regeneration. what I'm really fascinated by is how a lot of what's been going on in this topic, if we want to call it competitively, is that we're actually building new tools. So the Circular Design Guide is a new tool that's been created to share with many others. And so that sort of reduces the competition story and says, if we're going to get to the end of this race, we have to kind of build upon skills, as Malin and Chris have both shared. We have to expand that if we're going to move forward. I think we've shared the table and shared the process at the corporate level. And that has actually helped to get design lifted off the ground. So even though maybe it was competitive, I think our competition has spurred a story for design to enter the corporate room, if we will. But ways that I think we can actually work together maybe isn't in our day-to-day business. I think some of the things that we can be thinking about is how we do educate. I know many of my colleagues, and I'm quite sure many on this panel, are teaching at universities or doing remote courses, writing books or writing articles. I think some of that is a healthy sharing of the story about circular. I also think that there's a great opportunity for us just by being on this type of panel to advocate. I think it's your data, Joe, that says it's like we're 160 million or there's a lot of us who maybe need to be trained and equipped. I think there's a great opportunity for that in that space. And maybe lastly, I'll say, I mean, if you hang around with designers long enough, you'll know we're the fabulous people who make a lot of manifestos. Google it, there are many of them, and they date back over 100 years. I think they're powerful catalysts, these manifestos, these stories, to actually raise the bar and awaken designers. I think in many cases, we have the energy in our teams, respectively, probably in all of the panelists today. We have teams of people who are very hungry and anxious and aspirational, and they do want to make a difference in the world. And so I think getting beyond a manifesto is our shared responsibility, actually, where we have an opportunity to give people new skills. And I think there's a lot of road to walk yet before we get all of the designers in our world today up-leveled, upskilled, and ready to take on those challenges. So if we can do a digital transformation as we have over the last 10 years, I think there's enough room and business in this space for all of us to share the table and to share the heavy lift that will be to actually transform the world.
Does anyone want to build on that? Because that's a question that I think involves all of you. It's in some ways a bit of an invitation. I'm not expecting us to sign any contracts on this call. But does that inspire any of you? How do you relate to that notion that Cara outlined? Anyone want to jump in?
I think, for me, just the fact that, as you said, that Joe, we're having this panel is exciting. We have to, it's part of growing the pie, right? It really is part of growing the pie. That's a key kind of circular mindset, and it's key for our practice in that field. We've got to build this market, together. And I think, that's in everyone's interest. I think competition is actually helpful, hugely helpful as well, because, there are always those you have to, that are at various points in the journey in one's own agency. And so, being able to show that this is a big thing is incredibly powerful. So I think the more we can do in this area, the better, really.
Thank you, Chris. Esther, I'll come to you now, and let's talk about the sort of skills required, or the maybe the way that you and your colleagues work at Fjord at the moment, and maybe it's through contacts with universities or younger designers. Do you think that your teams and the wider design community has the skills and mindsets ready to design for a circular economy?
I think, Joe, more than the skills, I will ask, do we have the awareness? Are people aware of the digital footprint of their actions? Are we aware of the internet, how the internet consumes so much energy that it could be even the sixth continent, or that in 2019 alone, it polluted more than the air industry? Or even something as simple as, while deleting 30 emails, we consume the same energy as a light bulb in 24 hours. So probably we are not aware of that. So when we design digital services and products and implementing video streaming, for example, many designers are not aware that 1 hour a week of video streaming for a year consumes the same amount of energy as 2 refrigerators plugged in your kitchen continuously for a year. So until we don't have a global awareness of digital pollution, the same awareness as we have for other industries and materials that are perhaps more tangible, more visible and tactile, that the internet or digital, which for us human beings are still very abstract concepts when it comes to sustainability and circularity, then our teams will always design digital services and products that pollute. And our clients always keep asking for large videos as well to represent the brands and sell the products because of the lack of awareness. So I think laws and regulations around digital pollution need to change too. So the same as businesses are accountable for waste and sustainability process within the supply chain, they should equally be responsible for the digital and IT pollution. So as you can see, Joe, we do have the skills as designers, but we don't have the awareness perhaps to make the shift. And precisely the same as we have done with plastic or fashion or even fuel, where governments, companies and policymakers are implementing sanctions, I think we need to do the same for digital. So probably now the question is, how can we implement sustainability and circularity within digital? And the answer is making sure that we create those frameworks and that we are talking about and consider critical points. So implement new value propositions and take into account the best practices throughout the whole design process. So we use the same principles of recycle, reuse, repurpose, and reduce while designing digital content and systems so our designs don't become obsolete and live longer. And obviously, educating clients, as we just say, teams, members, and also the leadership. So we need to talk about it as we are doing here in this panel, but be conscious and be part of the change rather than perpetuating the problem. So also implementing inclusive design and keeping in mind diversity while designing all the services will also help. So how would a user, perhaps based in a region where fast internet or data connection is not available, so how can they use the digital products and services that we design? So until we don't tackle all those points, Joe, about digital pollution, it doesn't matter how skillful and capable our teams are, we won't be able to change anything. And obviously we talk about tangible things like product design and packaging and things like that. But digital, we don't have 20 years to make changes within digital pollution. I think we need to do it quite soon. So I think more than skill sets is awareness.
And awareness came through very strongly there. Have you got any suggestions about how we do it? Because is it the case of we need another report? Do we need, the facts that you reeled off at the start of your answer there I didn't know any of them. How do we provide people access to that information?
So we have a beautiful thing called the internet.
Oh, that uses quite a lot of energy though.
We have a lot of information in there, but I think we need to talk about it because it's not, mainstream yet, and it has to be mainstream because we use these little guys all the time, and we keep scrolling as if it doesn't matter. We keep just sending emails for things that probably we don't need, and all of that is pollution as well. So I think just talk about it and maybe do a manifesto, do some kind of I don't know, maybe document it somewhere where, designers can go and grab it and have that information.
Thanks, Esther. We've got a couple of really good questions in. Do keep sending them in because we've got a bit of time with this great panel, so we can ask them as we go through. Marlin, I think I was just listening to Esther there talk about awareness, and it strikes me that it's quite difficult to feel really comfortable or have good awareness of whole systems because they're really complex. Maybe part of the reason we're in such a mess at the moment is that we've trimmed off bits of a system and just tried to understand that and not taken account of the whole picture. And maybe designers traditionally have been taught to do that. We hear about user-centered design, which focuses just on the user and not maybe on the wider system. To what extent do we need to update or relearn approaches to design beyond just one user?
I mean, I think really good point you're making, Esther, on IT pollution, because it's not enough talked about. I think making complex systems understandable is, of course, difficult. And designers have capabilities to help visualize and sort of simplify and make things understandable, yes. But I would rather sort of point towards the design for behavioral change and the capabilities that we have to design actually the solutions to nudge people to do the right things, even if they don't necessarily know what those right things are. So if, for example, on your example, when you're opening up a Google window and you're searching for maybe a certain website, instead of taking you to that website that you're searching for, you're launching a Google search. And that search is also consuming energy instead of taking you right away. So if the system is designed to take you where you want to go, you saved a lot of energy, and then you multiply that by the time that happens, then you've done something that's automatically helps you to do the right thing. So I think this design for behavioral change, understanding nudging principles better, is really a skill set that we need to build among designers. I can also sort of add on the topic of skill sets that designers need for the future. And maybe this doesn't go so much towards the IT side, but more the physical side. I think we've seen the surge of creative technologists working alongside with us as designers. But if we think about the physical product design side of things, I see this whole new role of creative chemist or creative material technologist. But my father was a chemist. I never thought that I would, as a designer, work with chemistry, but I do. Now I do work with people who have expertise in chemistry. So I think there are new roles in the design industry that we need, and creative chemistry is one of them.
Thank you, Marlene. I'm going to give someone else a chance to come in on this, simply because we've had a question from Alice, which is along those sorts of lines. She says, as a human-centered designer myself, I'm finding that human-centered design is a little flawed right now, and it doesn't take into consideration systems and larger impact. Does anyone want to comment on that? Cara, perhaps you have a view on that.
Sure. I love this topic. I think one of the things we've been starting to do is ask ourselves, what if the planet was our client or our user? And how would we shift things? So I think it's absolutely a question we're even revisiting as we work with clients, because the system in which they live is not small and is not minor. And so to talk about people, I think we've made great headway in balancing that out. I think there's some beautiful diagrams on said internet that we're talking about that show sort of a reshift even in an image where we are no longer the center. And that we're part of a larger ecosystem. And in that sense, I think, the skills like Malin and Esther have highlighted, the skills that we need are partly be a learner, a constant learner. They're also about understanding how to reapply the tools and skills that you have. But I think there is a category, and we're even asking ourselves, what are we missing? What are the gaps that we have if we're going to be able to achieve the things we want to achieve in the world and help our clients to achieve those things? So absolutely, Alice, it is slightly missing a component, but I think that conversation is beginning to emerge. One pro tip is just to start to ask yourself, what would the planet need if we were changing behaviors or we were redesigning something? How would you incorporate it? And that doesn't answer all of the big systems of the planet, but I think it is at least a starting point to reimagine how you could be designing something in a new way.
Thank you.
I think I was just going to quickly add, Joe. I think that kind of that idea of sort of user-centeredness or people-centeredness, as I said earlier, is incredibly important on a sort of level of being empathic and understanding people's needs. But obviously, we're trying to also work with kind of user needs nested within larger strategies, right? And the degree we The degree to which we can do that is always variable, given the context. Some clients are more moldable than others around that, and if we went to the extreme on that, we'd all go out of business, and we couldn't push forward this topic at all. But I think we need to be accountable for the journey and continually trying to raise the bar with our clients around that. And I think part of that is I just want to endorse what Esther was saying around. I think as an industry, we're becoming a lot more aware of design as a sort of political act. I mentioned it at the beginning, and that part of that is becoming a lot more aware of our biases, even in terms of how we just enter the room, right? So I think one of the things, just to kind of reiterate what Cara was saying, is design is on this continuous learning journey as a craft, right? And thank goodness it is, because I think we really need to examine things like, how are we showing up with a dominance bias? For example, in the way, we might be representing a big company within an ecosystem for an innovation project, and I think really rethinking how we win and compete in society is one of the kind of key biases around how we show up that we're not even often aware of. So I think, if we want to get to this place where we all win more, when we all win more, we need to really look at the kind of biases we bring as baggage to the design process.
Just really quickly, Chris. Oh, sorry. One thing I just want to pick up on there, and we haven't got loads of time. So, if Chris, you could just give a concise answer to this one. What about, because you mentioned the client relationship, and that's come up a couple of times. Obviously, you are in a sense beholden to what clients are asking. Is that the main source of kind of lock-in or inertia that you're feeling? Is it a case of, if the client was asking the right question, you could do whatever you liked? I think if it's, I don't know if that was directed at me, Joe, but I think we're trying to, we're seeing a lot of growth around alternative business models, right? Where a traditional consulting model just, it isn't the place where we're, necessarily meeting the most interesting owners of system problems, the kind of, people who are funding, work on a really big system design challenge. So I think, looking at our own business models, innovating there is absolutely key. We've got things like Open IDEO, as you know. So I think, the truth is, that we need to put a stake in the ground ourselves as agencies. That then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? We need to say that then attracts the kind of business we want to do. And I think that's a really key point as well. Thanks, Chris. Esther, just coming back to you and thinking about what you said, that the skills are mostly already there. The skills of designers are really need to, and part of the theme of this conversation has been, how do we bring those more into play? And there'll be people watching who have large design teams. Some of the people we've been speaking to this year have hundreds of people that they consider designers. And are there certain skills or existing design practices that you think might be best suited to circular economy innovation? Maybe service design. It's a well-established practice of design. Is service design, is that kind of a superpower that would support circular economy innovation?
Well, I think it could be one of, surely it's not the only one, but service design could holistically look at all those points and define the systems, define the methodologies, define many things that could be really helpful for this innovation. But at the same time, I totally agree with Malin. I think having a team with mixed skills and mixed backgrounds, so basically, once again, diversity is really important for innovation. Skill sets that probably you didn't think back in 10 years ago, like your father, Malin. So now people with those skill sets and those backgrounds, they are extremely important for innovation. At the same time, we get stuck sometimes with methodologies, and methodologies need to evolve as well. So exactly the same as 10, 20 years ago, user-centered design was the key. Now we realize that no longer suits the needs for the 21st century. So we need to change to a more life-centric design when we take into consideration different points of our lives, but also the planet, the communities, the society, and everything else. And we take into consideration the bias that also Chris was mentioning as well. So we need to holistically look at it. Service design is one of the keys, probably one of the more, once again, holistic methodologies that we can apply, but it's not surely the only one.
So updating some of those skills for the contemporary relevance. We've had a couple of questions in around education, something that you mentioned, Cara, briefly, but I'm going to direct this one to Malin. Malin, when we came to your wonderful studio in Stockholm, there's a great gallery of products, stuff, tools and baby strollers and furniture. And one of the questions we've had in from David says, do you think design schools are educating circular designers? And he specifically mentions, is product design education mainly linear, and is there more to be done?
I think that design educations of today are not at all considering circularity to the level that they need to do. I also think that, even though sort of design management as an idea have been around for a long time, the business dimensions of design is not enough covered either in today's curriculum still. So it takes a lot of time to change design curriculums. So I do think that there's more to be done here when it comes to knowledge of circular economy. However, I would say, much as Chris started out saying, the younger generation really have a different mindset also. The new designers coming out now, the people that we employ, they really know, that their purpose as designers is to, positive impact. So there's definitely a different type of mindset that we see. But I'm not sure if all the toolkits are fully there yet.
Thanks, Malin. Just as we draw to a close, I've got one last question, which I'll invite each of you to answer. We touched upon it before. You have to work with clients, respond to briefs, and let's hope that can increasingly respond to those briefs with solutions that are fit for a circular economy. But for a moment, let's imagine let's take that out of the equation and imagine that budget and the brief wasn't an issue. What would be the dream circular economy design project for each of you? And Cara, let's start with you.
Sure. I mean, that's the big wild card, isn't it? I feel like some of the projects I'm getting to work on and the things I'm talking with clients about today are actually moving in that direction. But maybe I'll turn it a little bit on its head and say, I would like to work in a world where we're not going, is this a red button or a green button? We're actually talking about something much more holistically. We're talking at senior leadership levels. We get the opportunity to really be diving into the real challenges with that organization because it's a trusted relationship, and we're not seen as a vendor, but we're seen as a partner in the work that you might be doing as one of our clients. So I think for me, this idea of continuous relationship and continuous flow of activity and conversations about those big systems, because we believe our clients actually have some of the expertise we need, but looking at it out of a fundamentally trusting relationship. And then for me, the world is your oyster, and you have lots of opportunities to work on lots of things.
Esther, what about you? What's the dream project?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Cara. I think trust is the key for success, and collaboration. So imagine to have all of us, all these amazing agencies working together, putting all our brains and knowledge just together to do something that's impactful, and it really makes a change. So yeah, I think we need a superheroes team to fight against it.
The Avengers, the design Avengers. I like it. Chris, what about you?
I mean, you could imagine any particular consumer industry. Let's just, for example, imagine fashion, because I spend a lot of my time there. But I would love to take a really big corporate and be given kind of carte blanche, with a kind of corporate venturing project to create a kind of future business for them that really helps them show up differently in the world. So a local business that basically invests in the intersection between culture, local skills, local materials, new services, latest on-demand technologies for manufacturing, blah, 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 right? I mean, I think the point is where they could experience what it's really like to feed the system that feeds them. I think that would be my dream project, so that that would be the learning space for me in a project with it. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. And Marlin, lastly to you.
That sounds great, Chris. Can I join? No, I think there's so many things, but I'm a bit hung up about waste. That's what I've been spending a lot of time, done a lot of work in packaging. So for me, this notion of reducing the amount of waste and that ends up in nature and oceans is a huge deal. So I think my dream project would be something around, building really the big ecosystems for circular packaging and reusable packaging that can really scale and become something big, because this linear model is completely outdated.
Thanks, Marlin. We'll keep an eye on all your dream projects now that you've shared them with us, and hopefully when we do this again in a year's time, some of them can be coming to fruition. Fingers crossed anyway. Chris, Cara, Esther and Marlin, thank you so much for joining us at Summit 2020 today and answering so many questions from myself and from the Summit audience. So the shift to a circular economy, as we've heard, is accelerated and I would say is only possible with radical design innovation for products, for services and systems. Everything is designed, and even if you're not a designer yourself, you may be able to influence how we make and use things. So my call to you would be to seize that agency, to tap into some of the inspiration, the tools and resources and other networks of creative thinkers out there, and get started yourselves. To help you do that, do check out some of the other sessions that we've got at Summit 2020 on design and creativity. There's great stuff from the agency Sid Lee on their 10 tips for creativity. There's a great session on the need for creativity in the circular economy shift with Farah Golan and Chris Riley, plus a host of other stories from practicing designers. Thank you for joining me at this Summit 2020 session. Enjoy the rest of the event, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.